Mia's heart was pounding. She stood frozen in the doorway, staring out at the sea of roaring engines. 500 bikers, their leather jackets gleaming in the street lights, had gathered outside her house. Their motorcycles were parked in neat rows across the yard, the hum of their engines shaking the ground beneath her feet. Mia had never seen so many people in her life, and they were all here for her. For a moment she couldn't breathe. She stepped back, retreating into the safety of her living room, feeling the heat of embarrassment rush to her face. What was going on? She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't even wanted to go to the school prom. But now, as the bikes revved louder, she realized something was happening that she couldn't control. How had it come to this? The night before, Maya had sat in her room, scrolling through social media, her mind swirling with thoughts of what could have been. She was supposed to be at prom with her friends, feeling beautiful in her dress, dancing, laughing, enjoying her last year of high school. Instead, she was hiding behind her curtains, too scared to face the world outside. The bullying had gotten worse as the prom approached. Her classmates made it clear she wasn't welcome at the event. They called her ugly, too dark, too poor, too different. They even made fun of her dress when she showed it off in the school cafeteria. Mia wanted to scream, but she just kept quiet, shrinking in her seat. She couldn't understand why they hated her so much. She had never done anything to deserve it. "Just don't go," her best friend Emily had said after Mia confided in her. "It's not worth it. You'll just be miserable." Mia had agreed. She told Emily she wouldn't go to the prom. It was easier to stay home, away from all the eyes, away from the cruel words. But as she lay in bed that night, the pain of exclusion cut deeper than she expected. It wasn't just about the prom. It was everything. It was the way people looked at her every day, the way they laughed when she walked by, the way they made her feel like she didn't belong. So when the knock came on her door that evening, she hadn't been prepared. She had been pacing back and forth, trying to calm herself down when the doorbell rang, followed by the unmistakable sound of a loud motorcycle revving outside. Mia's stomach dropped. She wasn't expecting anyone, and she sure didn't want to face anyone. Reluctantly, she opened the door. And there they were. 500 bikers. The leader, a tall man with a thick beard and sunglasses, stepped forward first. He wore a black leather vest with a patch on the back that said, "The Brotherhood of Steel." Behind him, the others stood in silence, their faces grim but determined. Mia's mind raced. Was this a prank? A joke? Were they here to bully her even more? "Are you Maya Roberts?" the man asked, his voice deep and calm. Mia nodded, barely able to speak. She could feel the weight of the crowd staring at her, even though none of them had said a word. The silence was deafening. "We're here for you," he said. "We know what's been going on at your school. We've been watching. You're not alone anymore." Mia blinked. Her eyes were wide with confusion. I don't understand. What do you mean?" The man smiled, though it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was a smile of understanding. "The prom. You were supposed to be there, right? But you didn't go. Not because you didn't want to, but because they made you feel like you didn't belong. Like you're nothing." Mia's throat tightened. She didn't want to cry in front of these strangers, but the words hit too close to home. She wanted to say something, but nothing came out. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He'd unfolded it and handed it to her. "This is an invitation. You're going to prom, Mia. Not the way they wanted, but on your own terms." Mia stared at the paper in disbelief. The bikers weren't here to hurt her. They weren't here to cause trouble. They were here to do something no one else had done. They were here to help her. Her mind was spinning. She had never even imagined that something like this could happen. How had they found out? Why were they doing this for her? Before she could ask, the biker leader turned to the group and raised his hand. "All right, everyone. Let's give her some space." One by one, the bikers revved their engines and began to pull away. But not without a parting salute. They were leaving, but they were leaving her with something more valuable than she could have imagined. Mia closed the door slowly, her hands trembling as she stared down at the invitation in her hand. She couldn't believe it. She wasn't sure if she should be scared or grateful. The question kept running through her head. Why me? But before she could think any more about it, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her heart skipping a beat as she saw the text. You didn't think they'd let you off that easy, did you? It was from an unknown number. And that's when Mia realized the night was far from over. Hours earlier, Maya had been sitting in the cafeteria, trying to ignore the whispers and laughter that echoed around her. She sat alone at her usual table, her head down, staring at the half-eaten sandwich in front of her. She tried to keep her mind off the prom. Emily had tried to cheer her up, but Mia just wasn't in the mood. How could she be when everyone at school made her feel invisible or worse, like she was something to be picked on? As the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Maya stood up, gathering her things slowly. She was always the last to leave, taking her time so no one would notice her. But today was different. As she passed by a group of popular girls, one of them, Stacy, gave her a pointed look. "You're not actually going to the prom, are you?" she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mia felt the blood rush to her face. She was used to Stacy's comments, but today it felt worse. She just kept walking, her head down, her heart sinking. She wished she could just disappear. When the school bell rang at the end of the day, Mia slipped out of the building quietly. The parking lot was crowded with cars, and she was relieved to see that her mom hadn't yet arrived to pick her up. She didn't want to face her mom's worried expression just yet. She sat on the steps by the school entrance, watching as her classmates drove away, laughing and chatting about the prom. It was supposed to be the best night of high school, but Mia couldn't even imagine going anymore. Not after everything that had happened. As the minutes passed, her phone buzzed. Emily had sent a message. "Are you sure you want to skip the prom? We could still make it fun. Just us. You know, a mini prom in my backyard." Mia smiled weakly. She appreciated Emily's offer, but it just wouldn't be the same. The idea of dancing alone, of pretending everything was normal, felt empty. So she texted back, "No, I'm good. I'll stay home. Maybe next year, huh?" She didn't expect anyone to care, and that was fine. She wasn't going to let anyone make her feel worse. But what she didn't know was that something was already set in motion. And before the night was over, Maya's life would change in a way she couldn't possibly understand. The bikers, the invitation, the text. Who was behind it? Maya's thoughts swirled, but she didn't have much time to dwell on it. The doorbell rang again. This time Maya wasn't sure she wanted to answer it, but something inside her told her she had no choice. She slowly walked toward the door, her heart racing as she reached for the handle. And then, just as she was about to open it, something strange happened. The door swung open on its own. Maya froze. Standing there in the doorway was a man wearing a suit. He looked at her with a stern expression. "I need to speak with you, Mia," he said. Mia's breath caught in her throat as the man in the suit stepped forward. She didn't know who he was, but something about him made her instantly uneasy. His face was hard, unreadable, and his eyes were cold, like he wasn't here to talk, but to make something happen. The bikers were gone now, but she could still hear the echo of their engines in her mind. What was going on? Why did this man show up right after they left? Mia stammered, taking a step back. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder as if making sure no one else was watching. He turned back to her, his voice lowering to almost a whisper. "I'm here to help you, Mia, but we need to talk." Mia was scared. She didn't know who this man was or what he wanted, but she had a sinking feeling in her gut. The bikers, strange as it had been somewhat comforting. But this man? He felt like a threat. She hesitated, glancing at the door, weighing her options. Should she just slam it shut and lock herself inside? Should she scream for her mom? But what if this guy was here because of them, because of the bikers? "Who are you?" Maya repeated, a little louder this time. "What do you want?" The man gave a slight smile, but it wasn't a reassuring one. "You can call me Mr. Harris, but right now that's not important. What's important is what comes next." Nia didn't know what to say. Her head was spinning and her fingers were starting to feel clammy. The text, the bikers, the mysterious invitation. Now this man. It felt like everything was happening too fast. Listen, Mia, Mr. Harris continued, taking a step closer. I know you've been through a lot. You've been bullied, humiliated. You've had enough, right? You don't need to be alone anymore. What I'm offering you, it's an opportunity. Mia frowned, confused. Opportunity? What kind of opportunity? His eyes flickered for a moment, and then he spoke again, his tone softening. The opportunity to finally have control, to stop being a victim, to be someone who makes the rules. Mia shook her head, trying to understand what he meant. What are you talking about? I don't want anything from you. Mr. Harris didn't seem to mind her rejection. Instead, he stood still, studying her carefully. You say that now, but you don't know how this will change things. There's a chance here, one that doesn't come often. Mia's pulse quickened. She wanted to shut the door and get away from this man, but something inside her made her stay. What kind of chance? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His eyes gleamed and he leaned in a little closer. What if I told you that you could walk back into that school tomorrow, head held high, and everyone would know your name? What if I told you that you could walk into prom, not just as another face in the crowd, but as the one everyone's looking at? Mia's stomach twisted. Was he offering her some sort of revenge? Was this how he thought he could help her? But as much as she hated what the bullies had done to her, she didn't want to be like them. She didn't want to hurt anyone. I don't care about prom, she said, shaking her head. I don't need anyone's attention. I just want to be left alone. Mr. Harris was unfazed. It's not about prom, Mia. It's about respect. It's about power. And you don't get power by hiding in the shadows. You don't get power by running away. His words stung, but Mia didn't know what to say in return. She felt small, like he was right, like maybe she was hiding from the truth, from her fears, from the people who had been tormenting her for so long. Listen, Mr. Harris said, his voice shifting to something colder, more serious. The people who did this to you, they need to see you rise above them. They need to understand what it means to cross a line they can't come back from. And you, Mia? You're going to show them. Mia was silent, unsure of what he meant, or how she was supposed to do what he was asking. It felt like a dark deal she couldn't even begin to understand. But before she could respond, the phone buzzed again. This time it was Emily. Hey, I heard what happened. The bikers. Who were they? You okay? Mia quickly typed back. I don't know what's going on. This guy just showed up at my door. She felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. What did this man mean by rise above them? Was it a threat? Or was he offering something real, something that could make the pain go away? Mr. Harris stepped back, his eyes still locked on her. Think about it, Mia. You have a chance to change everything, but it's up to you whether you take it. He turned, walking down her front steps without another word. He didn't need to look back. Maya stood in the doorway, staring at the spot where he'd been. The night was still, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the lawn. But the silence was heavy, almost oppressive. She stepped back into the house and locked the door behind her, the invitation from the bikers still clutched in her hand. What did it all mean? Was this really her chance to take control of her life, or was she just being swept along in something she didn't understand? She walked to the window and peeked through the curtains, but the street was empty now. The bikers were gone, and Mr. Harris had vanished without a trace. Suddenly, Maya felt a chill. Something wasn't right. She glanced back at her phone, checking Emily's messages again. Hey, Maya, are you sure you're okay? But before Maya could respond, a new text appeared, this time from the unknown number. We'll be watching. The ball's in your court now. The words sent a shiver down her spine. What had she gotten herself into? Mia's hands trembled as she stared at the screen. The text message was brief, but its meaning was clear. We'll be watching. The ball's in your court now. She didn't know who "we" was, but she didn't have to guess for long. The heavy weight of the moment hit her all at once. The bikers, the mysterious man, and now this text. They were all connected somehow. Her first instinct was to tell her mom, but she didn't know how to explain any of it. Who would believe her? A group of bikers showing up at her house to give her a prom invitation, and now this strange man with promises of power and respect. Her mom would only worry, and Mia didn't want to make her more upset than she already was. She sat down on the couch, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Emily. "Please tell me you're not mixed up in something dangerous." Mia quickly typed back, her fingers shaking. "I don't know what's going on, Em. I don't even know who these people are." She stared at the blinking cursor, wondering what to say next. Emily was her closest friend, but how could she explain everything without sounding like she was losing her mind? Emily replied almost instantly, "Just be careful, okay? And if you need to talk, I'm here. Don't keep this to yourself." Mia smiled weakly, grateful for Emily's support, but her heart was still heavy. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something she wasn't ready for. She couldn't stop thinking about the man's words, "You have a chance to change everything." She closed her eyes and tried to think clearly. What did he mean by that? What was the power he spoke of? And why had the bikers been involved in all of this? Suddenly, a loud knock at the door made her jump. Her breath caught in her throat and she froze, eyes wide with fear. Was it the man again? Or the bikers? Were they coming back to push her into something she didn't want? Mia didn't move. The knock came again, louder this time, as if demanding attention. She swallowed hard and stood up, hesitating by the door. Her mind raced through every possible scenario, every worst-case outcome. But no matter how much she tried to prepare herself, she couldn't shake the fear that whatever was behind that door was going to change everything. Gathering her courage, she took a deep breath and slowly walked toward the door. She reached for the handle, her fingers numb, and turned it. But when she opened it, no one was there. Confused, Mia stepped outside, looking left and right down the empty street. The night air was cool against her skin, but it did nothing to ease the panic rising in her chest. She was about to close the door when she noticed something lying on her doorstep. A small black envelope. It looked ordinary, but the moment Mia saw it, she knew it was anything but. She picked it up carefully, her hand still trembling. The envelope was heavier than she expected, and the paper felt thick, like it was made for something important. There was no name, no address, just a symbol stamped in gold on the front. It was the same symbol the bikers had worn on their jackets, a silver chain wrapped around a skull. Mia's stomach dropped. This was no ordinary letter. She wasn't sure what it meant, but it was clear she was tangled in something far beyond her understanding. She took the envelope inside and sat down at the kitchen table. Her heart was pounding as she carefully slid her finger under the flap, tearing it open. Inside, she found a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. Unfolding it, she saw words typed in clean, bold font. The invitation stands, tomorrow after school. The old warehouse by the docks. Be there. Do not make us wait. Mia's breath caught in her throat. The warehouse by the docks? She had heard stories about it, mostly rumors and urban legends. It was an abandoned place where no one ever went. It was said to be a hideout for the more dangerous types in town, the kind of people who didn't take kindly to anyone who poked around in their business. Her mind spun. The invitation from the bikers, the man, and now this. What was it all leading to? She couldn't ignore it, but the idea of going to that warehouse made her stomach churn with dread. What if it's a trap? What if she was walking into something much worse than just bullies at school? Mia's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. Don't be late. The message was simple, but the words sent a chill down her spine. Who was watching her? Who knew her every move? What did they want from her? She thought about texting Emily, telling her everything. But what would she say? She couldn't drag her friend into something like this. She couldn't risk putting Emily in danger, even if she wasn't sure what was going on. Mia tossed the phone on the table and buried her head in her hands. She wanted to scream, to run away, but there was no escaping this. It felt like the world was closing in on her, and she had no idea how to break free. The next day, Mia dragged herself through school, trying her best to ignore the stares and whispers. It was harder than ever to focus. Every time she thought she could relax, she found herself thinking about the warehouse, about the bikers, about the man who had promised her power. At lunch, Emily sat beside her, her brow furrowed with concern. "Mia, are you sure you're okay? You've been distant lately. What happened with those bikers last night?" Mia shook her head, not wanting to talk about it. She didn't even have the words to explain. "I just don't know what to do with them," she finally said. "Everything feels off, like I'm caught in something that's bigger than me." Emily reached out and squeezed her hand. "You're not alone, Mia. Whatever happens, I'm here. But you have to be careful. Please don't let whatever this is take control of you." Mia wanted to believe her. She really did. But how could she? The feeling that something dangerous was closing in on her was too real. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Mia felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. She didn't know what awaited her at the warehouse, but she knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. She grabbed her things and walked out of the school, her footsteps heavy on the pavement. The old warehouse by the docks was only a few miles away, but it felt like a lifetime. As she approached the area, the sinking feeling in her gut only grew worse. The building loomed ahead, dark and abandoned. It looked even more menacing up close, the rusted metal doors half open, as if inviting her in. Mia stopped just short of the entrance, heart pounding, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She felt like she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't control. And then she heard it. The sound of motorcycles, revving in the distance. Mia's heart raced. The roar of the motorcycles grew louder, and she instinctively looked over her shoulder, half expecting the bikers to be behind her. But when she turned, all she saw was the empty, dimly lit street. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of salt water from the nearby docks. She was at the warehouse, the very place she had been told to come to. The old, decaying structure seemed to loom over her, its tall metal doors cracked open just enough to make her stomach churn. She didn't know what to expect, but everything about this felt wrong. Yet she also knew she couldn't back out now. The engines grew louder still, and Mia turned toward the sound. She could see their headlights in the distance, dozens of motorcycles heading straight toward her. Panic surged through her chest, but she forced herself to stay still. This was it. There was no turning back now. The bikers had found her again. They were here to make her a part of whatever twisted game they were playing. The group of motorcycles screeched to a halt in front of the warehouse. Mia stood frozen in place, her legs like lead as the riders dismounted one by one. Each wore the same black leather vests, emblazoned with the same silver skull and chain emblem. Mia's eyes darted to the leader, the man from last night, the one who had promised her she'd have the power to change everything. He stepped forward, his face obscured by sunglasses, but his presence alone was enough to make her stomach tighten. "Good. You made it," he said, his voice low and gravelly, almost like a whisper that carried on the wind. "We were starting to wonder if you had second thoughts." I didn't know what else to do," Mia said, her voice shaky. She couldn't keep the tremor out of her words, but she didn't want to show weakness. Not now. "What do you want from me?" The leader chuckled softly. "We're not here to take anything from you, Mia. We're here to give you what you deserve." Mia frowned, still confused. "I don't understand. What does all of this have to do with me? Why me?" He paused for a moment, looking her up and down as if sizing her up. "You've been beaten down your whole life. You've let them walk all over you. You think you can just stay in your room and hide forever." He shook his head, the faintest of smiles tugging at his lips. "You're better than that." Mia opened her mouth to protest, but he cut her off before she could speak. "You've got fire in you, Mia. You've got the kind of spirit they can't break. We see it in you." Mia felt a strange mixture of anger and confusion bubbling inside her. "I don't want to be a part of this. I just want to live my life without being bullied." The leader stepped closer, his expression turning more serious. "I know you want peace, but you're not going to find it by hiding. And you're certainly not going to find it by playing nice with people who are out to destroy you." The rest of the bikers stood quietly, watching the interaction. They were all waiting for something, waiting for Mia to decide whether she would take the next step, whether she would let them guide her or turn away. "You have two choices," the leader continued. "You can walk away right now, turn around and go home. Pretend like nothing ever happened. Or," he paused, his voice lowering to a dangerous tone, "you can join us. You can step into a world where you don't have to hide anymore. A world where you make the rules." Mia felt her mind whirring, caught between fear and curiosity. She was terrified by what he was suggesting, but at the same time something inside her stirred. She had always been the victim. Always the one who was stepped on, ignored, humiliated. But this was power, or at least it seemed like it. The promise of control over her life, something she had never had before. But at what cost? She looked into the leader's eyes, searching for any hint of kindness or sincerity. All she saw was cold calculation. He wasn't offering her anything out of the goodness of his heart. She swallowed hard. "And if I join you?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried in the silence between them. The leader's lips curled into a smile. "Then you'll never be weak again. You'll be more than just a face in the crowd. You'll be someone who commands respect. You'll make them regret every word they ever said to you." Mia's hands clenched into fists at her sides. The idea of standing up to the people who tormented her, of making them pay for the things they'd said and done, felt intoxicating. She had dreamed of it, fantasized about it in the privacy of her own room. But at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that the path he was offering wasn't the right one. She wasn't a bully. She didn't want to hurt anyone. She just wanted to be left alone. The leader, sensing her hesitation, stepped back and crossed his arms. "You don't have to decide now. But just know this, when you're ready, we'll be here. The opportunity won't last forever." Mia's heart hammered in her chest as she stood there, her mind spinning. She felt the pull of their offer, the temptation of power and control. But she also felt the weight of her conscience, the voice inside her telling her that this wasn't the way to solve her problems. Before she could respond, one of the bikers spoke up. "We're not here to force you, Mia. But you should know that once you've been offered the chance, there's no going back." Mia's stomach twisted at the thought. She wasn't ready to make a decision yet, but the pressure was mounting. The bikers weren't going to wait forever. She took a step back, trying to collect her thoughts. "I need time," she said, her voice firm despite the turmoil inside her. "I need time to think." The leader raised an eyebrow but then nodded. "Fine, but don't take too long." He motioned for the other bikers to mount their motorcycles again. "We'll be in touch, Mia. The ball's in your court." As the group of bikers roared to life and sped away into the night, Mia stood in front of the warehouse, her hands shaking, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of the choice she had to make pressing down on her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her heart skipping a beat as she saw the message from the unknown number. "It's time to decide. You'll have your moment." The message was cryptic, but it was clear enough. Mia's moment of reckoning was fast approaching. Mia didn't know what she was going to do. But she knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be the same again. The chill of the night air seemed to seep into Mia's bones as she stood alone in front of the abandoned warehouse. The sound of the motorcycles faded into the distance, but their presence lingered heavy and ominous. Her heart raced, and she felt a knot form in her stomach. What had just happened? The bikers were gone now, but Mia couldn't shake the words that had been spoken. "The ball's in your court. The opportunity won't last forever." Her fingers tightened around the phone in her hand, the text from the unknown number still visible on the screen. "It's time to decide. You'll have your moment." Mia knew she couldn't ignore it. She had to make a choice soon, one that would change everything. But she wasn't ready. She didn't know what the right decision was. Could she really join these people? Was this the kind of life she wanted? To become someone who lived by power and fear? She let out a shaky breath and pocketed her phone. She couldn't think straight here. The warehouse, the bikes, the people, they were all too much. Mia turned and walked slowly back to her car, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and fear. When she got home, the house was eerily quiet. Her mom was still at work, so Mia had the place to herself. She headed straight to her room, closing the door behind her. The room felt small and comforting, but nothing could shake the heaviness in her chest. She sat down at her desk, staring blankly at her reflection in the window. She had always felt invisible at school, but now it was as if the weight of the world was pushing down on her, making her feel more trapped than ever. What am I supposed to do? She thought back to the promises the leader had made. You'll never be weak again. You'll make them regret every word they said. The idea of finally standing up to the bullies, of taking control of her life, was so tempting. She had always been the one pushed around, the one overlooked. But becoming like them? Becoming someone who used fear to get what she wanted? No, she wasn't like them. Maya rubbed her eyes, trying to clear her thoughts. She couldn't keep going in circles. She needed answers. And for that, she needed to talk to someone who wasn't a part of this whole mess. Emily. She pulled out her phone again and typed a quick message. Hey, Em. Can I talk to you? I need help figuring something out. She hit send, feeling a little lighter. Emily would know what to say. She always did. Within seconds, Emily replied, Of course. What's going on? Mia hesitated before typing out her response. She had to tell Emily what had happened, but how could she explain it all? The bikers, the man, the weird invitation. I don't know what to do, Em. I don't know if I'm making the right choice about everything. I'm scared. The bikers, they want me to join them. They say I'll have power, that I can stop being a victim. But I don't know what that really means. I don't know if I can trust them. She stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. Emily's reply came almost immediately. Mia, what do you mean they want you to join them? That doesn't sound right. What's going on? Mia sighed deeply, her finger hovering over the screen. She typed out everything, the bikers showing up at her house, the invitation, the man who had made the offer, the warehouse, and sent it in one long message. For a long time, Mia stared at the screen, waiting. But Emily didn't reply. Panic began to rise in her chest. What if Emily didn't know what to say? What if she thought Mia was crazy? But then, finally, Emily's reply appeared. Maya, listen to me. You have to be careful. You can't just walk into something like that. I know you want to feel powerful to stop the bullying, but this isn't the way. They're manipulating you. They want you to be part of something that's dangerous. Mia read the message over and over again, trying to absorb it. Emily was right. She wanted power, but this wasn't how to get it. She didn't want to become like the people who had hurt her. She wanted to take control of her life, but she didn't need to hurt others to do it. What do I do then? Mia typed back. How do I make them leave me alone? Emily's response was swift. You need to tell someone. Your mom, the school, someone who can help. You don't have to face this on your own. Mia stared at the screen, her thoughts racing. Emily was right. She couldn't fight this battle by herself. She needed to tell her mom. She needed to tell someone who could actually do something about it. But even as she thought about it, doubt crept in. What if they didn't believe her? What if they just thought she was overreacting? Would they take her seriously? Maya ran her fingers through her hair, frustration building. She had been trying so hard to keep everything together, to not let the fear consume her. But now she felt like she was on the edge of something much bigger than herself. She took a deep breath. She had to make a decision. And the longer she waited, the more control they would have over her. The next morning, Mia woke up with a sinking feeling in her stomach. She had barely slept, her mind a constant whirl of conflicting thoughts. The day ahead felt like an endless countdown, a ticking clock that reminded her of the choice she had to make. When she stepped off the bus at school, she immediately felt the weight of the place, loud, full of faces she didn't recognize, and some she wished she could forget. The hallway was crowded with students, but all Mia could think about was what had happened the night before. She couldn't get the bikers out of her mind. The cold, empty feeling in her chest only grew as she walked down the hall, the weight of their words still hanging over her. As she passed by the lockers, she caught sight of Sarah and her friends laughing near the end of the hallway. The very people who had tormented her for years. For a moment, Maya considered walking up to them, confronting them, maybe telling them what had happened last night, making them see her in a different light. But then she thought about what the leader had said, "You'll never be weak again." Could she really confront them the way he was suggesting? Would she ever have the strength to stand up to them, not as a victim, but as someone who controlled her own fate? Before Maya could decide, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a new message from the unknown number. "You're not alone. The choice is still yours." Mia's blood ran cold. It was happening. The moment was coming. Mia's hand shook as she stared at the text message. "You're not alone. The choice is still yours." The words seemed to echo in her head, reverberating like a drum beat. She looked up, her breath catching in her throat as she scanned the crowded hallway. It felt as if the walls were closing in on her, the noise of chattering students growing distant as her mind raced. Who is doing this? Her eyes darted to the left and right, trying to make sense of it. Who was watching her? Who was controlling this entire situation? The bikers had made their offer clear, and now the strange texts. It was all too much. She stuffed her phone back into her pocket, trying to act normal, to appear calm, but she could feel the eyes of the world on her. She knew people were staring, whispering about her. The quiet girl. The one who's always by herself. Was this just another phase of being the outsider? Or was this the beginning of something darker? She forced her feet to move forward, pushing through the crowd toward her locker. Emily's words echoed in her mind. "You don't have to face this on your own. Tell someone. You're not alone." But Maya wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Emily? The bikers? Her mom? Everyone seemed to have their own agenda. As she approached her locker, she tried to shake off the nerves. But then, as she reached for her combination lock, a sharp voice broke through the chaos. Well, look who decided to show up." Mia's stomach twisted as she turned. There stood Sarah, the queen of her school's social scene, flanked by her usual entourage of friends. They were all watching her, their eyes gleaming with an almost predatory satisfaction. Mia knew they weren't just interested in her because she was different. No, they had always targeted her because she was vulnerable, quiet, weak. And for the first time, Mia wondered if she could finally stop being that person. But the doubt crept in. Could she really change everything by standing up to them? "What do you want, Sarah?" Mia forced herself to speak, though her voice sounded foreign to her own ears, more confident, almost detached. Sarah smirked. "Heard you had some special visitors last night. Those bikers. Pretty exciting stuff, huh?" Mia's heart lurched. She hadn't told anyone about the bikers. How did Sarah know? Sarah took a step closer, her expression now one of mockery. "You didn't think we wouldn't hear about it. You've always been a quiet little ghost in the hallways, Mia. But now you've got a crowd interested in you." She leaned in even closer, her words dripping with fake sweetness. "What's the deal? Are you finally going to stand up for yourself? Or are you just going to keep hiding in your room with your little fantasies?" Mia clenched her jaw, fighting back the tears that threatened to rise. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but the fear was choking her. She felt her mind race. Do I stay quiet and let her mock me? Or do I finally fight back? Just then, her phone buzzed again, interrupting the silence between them. Mia glanced down, her heart racing when she saw the unknown number once more. "Your moment is coming, Mia. Don't let them push you any longer. The choice is still yours." It was the same message, but this time it hit her differently. Something in those words was like a spark, igniting something deep within her. The choice is still mine. The choice is still mine. Mia stood straighter, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Sarah. "I don't need your approval, Sarah. And I certainly don't need to play by your rules anymore." Sarah's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Oh, and what's that supposed to mean? Mia didn't know exactly what she was doing. It felt like she was stepping onto a new path, one that she hadn't fully planned for, but one that was suddenly clear. It means I'm done being your punching bag. The words were out before she could stop them. Sarah's smirk faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, rolling her eyes. Whatever, Mia. You're still the same loser. One biker visit doesn't change that. She turned to her friends and shrugged. Let's go. There's nothing interesting here. As Sarah and her friends walked away, Mia stood frozen at her locker, her mind spinning. She had said it. She had finally said the words. She wasn't going to be the same person anymore. She wasn't going to let Sarah or anyone else make her feel small. Her phone buzzed once more, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was from Emily. Please tell me you're okay. What happened with Sarah? Mia smiled weakly, her hands still trembling. I don't know, Em. I think I finally stood up to her. I don't know if it was the right thing to do, but I think I'm ready to make my own choice now. Emily's response came quickly. That's great, Mia. But be careful. The bikers, they're dangerous. Whatever you decide, don't let them control you. Mia nodded, even though she knew Emily couldn't see her. She had to think things through, but the message was clear. She couldn't let the bikers control her, no matter what they promised her. She needed to make her own path on her own terms. Later that afternoon, Mia's thoughts kept drifting back to the warehouse, to the offer the bikers had made, and to the power they promised her. The more she thought about it, the more it felt like a trap. There was no way it could be a simple offer. No one gives power away without expecting something in return. As school ended and the final bell rang, Mia felt a strange sense of resolve growing inside her. She had made up her mind. She couldn't keep hiding from her problems. She had to face them head on, but on her own terms. She got on the bus and headed home, her heart heavy but determined. When she arrived at the house, the quiet felt oppressive. Mia headed straight for her room, shutting the door behind her. She needed space to think. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was from her mom. Hey, I'm heading home soon. Are you okay? Mia hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. She could tell her mom what had happened. She could tell her everything, the bikers, the messages, the offer. But a part of her held back, unsure of how her mom would react. Would she freak out? Would she tell Mia to stay away from the bikers and everything connected to them? I'm fine, Mom, just thinking about things. Mia tossed her phone onto the bed and stared out the window, her thoughts swirling. She had made her choice. She was going to stand up for herself, no matter the cost. But just as the thought crossed her mind, the phone rang. The name on the screen made Mia's heart stop. It was from an unknown number. She picked up the phone, her breath caught in her throat. Hello, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Mia, came a familiar voice, low and calm. It's time. The warehouse. Be there. We're waiting for you. Before Maya could respond, the line went dead. The silence in her room felt suffocating. She looked at her phone, heart racing, fear and anticipation flooding her in equal measure. It was happening. The moment she'd been dreading and waiting for was here. Mia's hand trembled as she held the phone to her ear, staring at the screen as the call ended abruptly. The eerie silence in her room felt suffocating. The warehouse. Be there. We're waiting for you. The voice on the other end was calm, almost like it had been rehearsed, but there was something about it that chilled Mia to her core. She felt a sense of urgency wash over her, like she was running out of time. What was this all about? Her heart raced as she stood frozen, staring at her phone in disbelief. Who were these people? Who was behind the call? There was no doubt in her mind that the bikers were involved, but the cryptic nature of the message left her with more questions than answers. And yet, she couldn't ignore the pull. The strange draw that made her feel like she had no choice but to go. You're not alone. The choice is still yours. The words from the earlier text flashed in her mind. Mia clenched her fists, trying to steady herself. This wasn't just about standing up to Sarah anymore. It was bigger than that. Something was happening, and Maya was at the center of it. She took a deep breath and grabbed her jacket from the back of her chair. She couldn't stay here, not while the phone was still ringing in her head, while the message was still lingering. She had to go. But where? What's going to happen when I get there? The warehouse. The place where it had all started. The place where she had been offered power, control. Where she could make everything right. But at what cost? Mia shook her head, trying to banish the thoughts from her mind. She couldn't afford to second-guess herself. She had made the choice. Now she had to face it head-on. The drive to the warehouse felt like a blur. Mia barely remembered the route, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she tried to keep herself from shaking. The lights from passing cars blurred into streaks of color outside the windshield, and the radio played softly in the background, a distant reminder of the world outside her bubble of anxiety. Her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Was this a mistake? Should I turn around? But as the familiar silhouette of the warehouse appeared in the distance, Maya's chest tightened. She didn't stop. She couldn't stop now. This was the point of no return. She parked a few yards from the entrance, her headlights illuminating the cracked pavement as she took a deep breath. The air was cool, the smell of rust and decay thick in the night. She didn't know what she was walking into, but it felt like the moment of truth, her moment. When Mina stepped out of the car, the sound of her boots against the ground seemed too loud in the quiet. The door to the warehouse was already open, just slightly like an invitation. She approached cautiously, her heart hammering in her chest. There were no sounds, no engines revving, no voices calling out. Just the cold emptiness of the night air surrounding her. She stood still for a moment, taking in the shadows. The lights inside the warehouse were dim, casting long, eerie shadows against the walls. There was a sense of foreboding here, something that didn't sit right in her gut. But then the sound of a motorcycle revving in the distance broke the silence. Mia turned to see the headlights of a bike approaching, followed by another and another, until there were 5 bikes in total, coming straight toward her. Her breath hitched. This was it. The riders slowed down as they reached her, each of them wearing the same black leather vests with the silver skull and chain emblem. The same group from before. The leader was at the front, the man who had given her the choice, who had promised her power, respect, and control. He stopped his bike in front of her and dismounted, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. "Glad you decided to show up, Mia," he said, his voice low and calm. "You've got guts." Mia didn't know how to respond. She was speechless, her body frozen in place as she stared at the bikers. The leader wasn't smiling, but there was something in his gaze that made her stomach churn. "You ready to take your place?" he asked, stepping closer. Mia wanted to run. The instinct to flee was strong. But she stayed rooted to the spot, unwilling to show fear, unwilling to let them see that she was afraid. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice shaky but determined. The leader raised an eyebrow, as if surprised by her question. "What we've always wanted," he said slowly. "To see if you're strong enough to take what's yours." He motioned for her to follow him inside the warehouse, and Mia hesitated for just a second before stepping forward. The door creaked loudly as it swung open, revealing the dark interior. The air inside was thick with the scent of old wood and metal. It was quiet, too quiet. Mia's footsteps echoed in the cavernous space as she walked inside, the bikers following closely behind. The leader led her to the center of the room, where a small group of people were waiting. Mia couldn't make out their faces in the shadows, but she could sense their presence. "You've been given a choice, Mia," the leader said, turning to face her. "Now it's time to see if you're ready for the responsibility that comes with it." The words felt heavy, like a weight pressing down on her chest. Mia's mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what was happening. Before she could speak, the leader raised his hand. "No more running. No more hiding. Tonight, you decide what kind of person you want to be. Do you want to keep being weak, scared of everyone around you? Or you want to take control of your life, to stop being the victim, to be the one who calls the shots? Mia felt a surge of emotion rise within her. Anger, frustration, fear, but also something else. A sense of power. A sense of freedom. But then a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mia?" She froze, her blood running cold. It was Emily. She hadn't seen her friend approach, but there she was, standing near the entrance of the warehouse, her eyes wide with concern. "Emily?" Mia whispered, taking a step toward her, the shock of seeing her there almost too much to process. "What are you doing here?" I couldn't let you do this alone," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I had to see for myself. Mia, don't let them manipulate you. Don't let them make you into something you're not." The leader chuckled softly, turning toward Emily. Well, looks like you brought a friend." Mia felt a rush of emotion, relief, fear, and confusion all crashing into one. What was she supposed to do now? Her gaze flicked back to the leader, and for a brief moment everything seemed to go silent. He was waiting for her to make her choice, waiting for her to decide who she wanted to be. Mia looked between the leader, Emily, and the shadows that seemed to stretch around her, closing in. This was her moment. The moment when she would finally take control or lose herself forever. Mia stood frozen, her heart pounding as she glanced back and forth between Emily, who stood just inside the doorway, and the bikers who were watching her intently. The atmosphere in the warehouse felt thick with tension. It was as if everything had come down to this moment. This one decision that would determine her future. Emily's face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. She stepped further into the warehouse, her hands raised as if trying to shield Mia from the overwhelming presence of the bikers. "Mia," Emily said softly, her voice shaking but firm. "You don't have to do this. Please, these people, whatever they're offering you, it's not worth it. You're better than this." Mia felt a pang of guilt twist in her chest. Emily had always been there for her, the one person who truly understood her. But right now, as much as she wanted to listen to her friend, a part of Maya was drawn to the power the bikers were offering. The idea of being respected, of no longer being the victim. It was intoxicating. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, so many years letting people like Sarah walk all over her. Was this the way to finally make a change? The leader of the bikers stepped forward, his boots echoing in the silent space. His eyes were cold, calculating. "Your friend's right, Mia. You don't have to make a decision now, but trust me. If you want respect, if you want to stop being afraid, this is the only way." He gestured to the group of bikers standing in the shadows. "We don't do things by half measures, but when you're with us, you won't have to worry about anything anymore. No more bullies, no more people looking down on you." Mia felt her pulse quicken. The idea was tempting, too tempting to ignore. For once, she wouldn't be weak. She wouldn't be the girl who was shoved into lockers or laughed at behind her back. The freedom was right there in front of her, wrapped up in the form of these bikers and their promises of power. But then Emily's voice cut through the haze of temptation. "Please, Mia," Emily said, stepping closer, her eyes filled with desperation. "They're using you. Don't you see that? This isn't real power. This is just manipulation. You don't need to become like them to be strong. You're already strong." Mia's hands clenched into fists, the fight between what she wanted and what was right playing out inside her head. Her mind swirled with confusion. Emily's words made sense, but they'd also seemed so far away. How could Emily understand? How could anyone understand what it was like to feel weak, to be the one everyone ignored or picked on? Mia took a deep breath, trying to ground herself. She couldn't let the pressure of the moment cloud her judgment. What was really important? "I'm not weak," Mia said softly, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. "But I'm also not like you." She turned to face the leader of the bikers, her resolve growing stronger. "I don't need to hide behind a group to feel powerful. I want to stand on my own." For a moment, the room was dead quiet. The bikers exchanged glances, and the leader's expression darkened. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can walk away from this? You think this is a game?" Mia felt the weight of his gaze, but she didn't flinch. "I don't think anything's a game," she replied, her voice steadying. "But I'm not going to let you control me. I don't want your power. Not like this." The leader's lips curled into a sneer. "You'll regret this, Mia. No one ever gets out once they've made the choice. You don't just walk away from us." His voice was cold, the warning clear. Emily rushed to Maya's side, her hand resting gently on her arm. "We can leave now. You don't have to stay here with them." Mia's heart raced as she glanced back at the leader and the group of bikers. Part of her wanted to run. Part of her wanted to leave this all behind, to go home, to forget everything that had happened. But another part of her, an unfamiliar, stronger part, knew that this was her moment to choose. She wasn't going to let anyone define her anymore. "Let's go," Mia said firmly, her voice rising in strength. "I'm not afraid of you." With that, she turned and walked toward the door, Emily following close behind. The bikers didn't try to stop her, but the silence in the warehouse was thick with tension. The leader watched them leave, his eyes burning into Maya's back. As they stepped out into the night air, the door of the warehouse slammed shut behind them, as if closing off that part of Mia's life for good. Mia didn't look back. The drive back to her house was silent, but not uncomfortable. Emily sat in the passenger seat, her eyes occasionally glancing over at Mia. Neither of them said anything for a while, but Mia could feel the weight of what had just happened settling on her shoulders. "Are you okay?" Emily asked finally, breaking the silence. Mia let out a breath, her hand still gripping the steering wheel. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I think I'm okay. I think I made the right choice. But it's not easy." Emily smiled softly. "You did what was right. And that's what matters. You don't need them to be strong. You already are." Mia glanced over at Emily, her chest tightening with gratitude. She had almost lost herself in the idea of power, of being someone different, someone who commanded respect through fear. But Emily had reminded her that true strength didn't come from intimidation. It came from within. It came from standing up for yourself, even when the world around you was trying to push you down. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this," Mia said quietly. "You shouldn't have had to see all of that." Emily shook her head. "Mia, I'm your friend. I'll always have your back, no matter what. We've got this." Mia smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe she didn't need to prove anything to anyone after all. But just as she pulled into the driveway, her phone buzzed. The familiar number flashed on the screen. Another message from the bikers. "This isn't over. You'll regret walking away. We always get what we want." Mia's stomach dropped as she stared at the message. The bikers weren't going to let her go that easily. And that's when Mia realized something. The choice she had made wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Mia sat frozen in her car, the phone still in her hand, staring at the message that felt like a shadow hanging over her. "We always get what we want." Her heart raced. The bikers weren't done with her. She had known deep down that they wouldn't just let her walk away. This wasn't a group you could simply turn your back on. They had a way of making people pay when they didn't get what they wanted. Emily's voice brought her back to the present. "Mia, are you okay?" Emily's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a soft reminder that she wasn't alone in this. "We can go inside. Let's just get out of here for now." Mia nodded absently, putting the phone down and gripping the steering wheel. What now, she wondered. She had made the choice to walk away, to refuse the biker's offer, but that didn't seem to matter to them. If anything, it made things worse. The power they had over her seemed to grow with every text, every threat. She didn't speak as she pulled into the driveway and parked. Emily didn't push her, but Mia could tell her friend was worried. And Mia couldn't blame her. The whole situation was spiraling fast, and it wasn't just about standing up to Sarah anymore. It was about something much bigger than either of them. Inside, Maya locked the door behind her, and Emily followed her into the kitchen, where she poured herself a glass of water. Mia took a seat at the table, trying to calm her mind. Her thoughts raced one after another. What had she gotten herself into? The bikers were no longer just a distant threat. They were right here in her life. And if they were going to come after her, she couldn't hide forever. Emily took the seat across from Mia, her eyes serious but filled with concern. Mia, I know you're scared, but you don't have to face this alone. We'll figure it out, okay? Mia nodded slowly, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. I should have known it wouldn't be that easy, she said, rubbing her forehead. I thought if I just walked away, it would be over. But now, I don't know. What if they come after me again? What if they hurt someone I care about? Mia, they're not going to get to you. Not if you don't let them. And we're going to figure this out together. We'll call the cops if we have to, or we can talk to someone who can help. Mia shook her head. She had heard too many horror stories about people getting involved with gangs like this. The police might not even be able to help her, especially with how tight-knit the bikers seemed. If they wanted to make her life a living hell, they could probably find a way to do it. I don't know if the cops are the answer, Mia said quietly. But I know I can't just sit around waiting for them to come after me. I need to take control of this before it gets worse. Emily's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Mia, what are you thinking? I don't know, Mia admitted, standing up and pacing. But I can't keep running. If I keep hiding, if I keep avoiding them, I'm giving them the power. And I don't want to be afraid anymore. Mia, you're not alone in this, Emily said, standing up to follow her. Whatever you decide to do, we'll figure it out together. But don't let fear control you. Mia looked at her friend, gratitude swelling in her chest. Emily's unwavering support meant everything. But Mia knew she had to face this, no matter how terrifying it was. She couldn't keep running away from something that was chasing her down. The next morning, Mia woke up to an unsettling quiet. The usual sounds of birds chirping outside her window seemed far away, as if the world was holding its breath. She had barely slept, her mind consumed with the bikers' threats and the uneasy feeling that they were still out there watching her. Her phone buzzed again. We'll give you one more chance. Be at the warehouse tonight, or we'll take what's ours. Mia's stomach flipped as she read the message. They weren't going to let up. She could feel it in her bones. She had a decision to make. Either she went back to the warehouse and faced whatever they had planned for her, or she found a way to stop them before they destroyed everything she worked for. That afternoon, Emily came over again, a determined look on her face. You're not going alone, Emily said firmly. If you go back, I'm coming with you. Whatever happens, we'll do it together. Mia appreciated Emily's loyalty, but she couldn't drag her friend into this. No, she said, shaking her head. This is something I have to do alone. I can't put you in danger too. You've already done enough by being here for me. Mia, I'm not letting you do this by yourself, Emily insisted. I'm your best friend. If something happens, I'm going to be there. Mia looked at Emily, the weight of everything suddenly feeling heavier. The thought of facing the bikers again, of stepping into that dark warehouse filled with people who didn't care about her, made her blood run cold. But Emily's voice cut through the fear. You're strong, Emily said softly. And I'm not going anywhere. We've got this. Mia swallowed hard, her throat tight. She didn't know if she could do it, but with Emily by her side, maybe she stood a chance. She took a deep breath. Okay, we'll go together. That night, as the sun set, Maya and Emily drove back to the warehouse. The streets were quieter than usual, the air still and heavy with anticipation. As they turned onto the same stretch of road, Maya's heart began to pound faster. Every instinct in her screamed to turn around to run. But she couldn't. Not anymore. The warehouse loomed in front of them like a dark, looming monster, and the only way to survive was to face it head-on. When they parked and got out of the car, Maya felt a surge of fear and adrenaline coursing through her. The same feeling she had the first time she had come here, but this time she wasn't alone. The door to the warehouse was already open. Maya's breath caught as they walked toward it. This time there was no turning back. They stepped inside. The bikers were there, standing in the shadows just like before, their eyes cold and unreadable. "You're back," the leader said, his voice like gravel. "We've been waiting for you, Mia." Mia stood tall, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach. "I'm here. What do you want from me?" The leader stepped closer, his lips curling into a grin. "We've been patient, but patience runs out. You can either join us or face the consequences." Mia's heart raced. This was it. She wasn't backing down this time. "I don't want your power," Mia said, her voice steady. "I'm done being afraid. You can't control me anymore." The leader's smile faded, his eyes darkening with fury. "We warned you, Mia. You should have joined us." Before Maya could react, a sudden noise rang out behind her. The door slammed shut with a loud bang, trapping them inside. And that's when Mia realized this wasn't just a choice anymore. It was a fight for her life. The door slammed shut behind them, and Mia's heart leaped into her throat. The sudden, deafening sound echoed through the warehouse, making the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She turned toward the entrance, but there was no escaping now. They were trapped inside. Emily grabbed Mia's arm, pulling her closer. Her face was pale, eyes wide with panic. "What are we going to do?" she whispered urgently. Mia could barely hear her over the pounding of her heart. The leader of the bikers stepped forward, a dangerous grin spreading across his face. The bikers behind him shifted, closing the space around them, their heavy boots thudding on the concrete floor. "We gave you a chance, Mia," the leader said, his voice low and threatening. "Now you're going to learn what happens when you refuse to be part of this." Mia's mind raced. She could feel the heat rising in her chest. She wasn't going to back down. She had already made that choice. But now, with the door closed and no way out, she knew they had to fight for their survival. She had to protect Emily, protect herself. Her eyes darted around the warehouse, trying to find something, anything, that could help. It was dimly lit, with shadows stretching across the walls, and there was an old, rusted metal bar in the corner that might work as a weapon. But they didn't have much time. "We're not joining you," Mia said, her voice stronger than she felt. "You don't scare me. Whatever you think you can do, it won't break me." The leader's grin faltered for a moment, as if he wasn't expecting Mia to stand firm. He narrowed his eyes, and for a split second, Mia saw something in his expression. It wasn't just anger. There was a hint of respect there. "You're a lot braver than most people I've met," the leader said, his voice cool. "But that doesn't mean you'll get out of this unscathed." Mia didn't flinch. She knew what was coming, and she had to be ready. Without warning, the leader motioned to his bikers. Two of them stepped forward, their faces cold, their movements deliberate. They didn't speak, but their body language said it all. They were here to make sure Mia stayed in line. "Listen," Mia said quickly, holding up her hands in a gesture that wasn't surrendering, but trying to buy them a moment. "I'm not part of your gang. I never wanted to be. But I'm not going to let you hurt anyone. Not Emily, not me, not anyone." Emily, standing by Mia's side, looked ready to fight too. "We don't want any trouble," she said, her voice trembling. But there was strength there too. "Just let us go. This doesn't have to be like this." The leader stepped closer, his boots scraping the floor. "You think this is about your little friendship?" His voice was dark, mocking. "This is about control. You think you can just walk away from what we've built? No one walks away. No one." Before Maya could respond, the two bikers who had stepped forward lunged at her, grabbing her arms. The force of their grip caught her off guard, and she gasped in surprise as they pulled her back toward the center of the warehouse. Emily cried out, but the other bikers moved in, their hands grabbing her arms too, holding her in place. Mia's pulse raced as she struggled, trying to break free. "Stop," she yelled. "You don't have to do this." The leader's eyes glinted with malice. "You wanted to play tough, Mia. Now you'll learn what happens when you refuse to respect the power you're offered." Mia fought harder, her breath coming in quick, sharp bursts. She could feel the pressure in her chest, the panic rising as the grip on her arms tightened. She kicked her legs, trying to break free, but the bikers were too strong. In that moment, the warehouse door suddenly burst open, slamming against the wall. The light from outside flooded the room and Maya froze. For a second, she thought it was just another one of the bikers coming in. But then she saw who it was. The sound of revving engines echoed through the warehouse, and a new group of riders rolled in this time. They weren't wearing the black leather jackets of the gang that had been tormenting Mia. These riders were different. They wore a different emblem on their jackets, one that Mia had never seen before. But what struck her most was the way they moved. There was a confidence about them, an undeniable strength. The leader of the new group dismounted his bike and walked toward her. He was tall, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see right through her. His voice was commanding but calm as he addressed the bikers who had Mia in their grip. "Let her go," he said firmly. The words weren't a suggestion, they were a command. The bikers holding Mia didn't move at first, but then the leader of the old gang, the one Mia had refused, glanced at the new arrivals, his expression hardening. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone dark, but respectful enough to acknowledge that these new riders weren't people to be trifled with. The new leader's gaze never left Mia. "We're here for her. Now step aside." The tension in the air was thick as both groups of bikers stared each other down. Mia's heart hammered in her chest as she tried to make sense of what was happening. Who were these bikers? What did they want with her? The leader of the old gang, after a long, tense moment, gave a slow nod. "Fine," he muttered, his tone filled with resentment. "But remember, she's not free. Not by a long shot." The two bikers released Mia, stepping back as the new riders closed in around her. Mia staggered back, rubbing her sore wrists, her mind spinning. Emily moved to her side, her eyes wide with confusion. The leader of the new group, who Mia now realized was a tall, well-built man with short, dark hair, took a step closer, his eyes softening as they landed on Mia. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Mia nodded, still unsure of what was happening. "Who are you?" "We're here to help," the man said, his expression soft but firm. "We're not the ones who are going to hurt you, Mia. We've been keeping an eye on you." Mia swallowed hard. "Why? Why are you here?" He hesitated, looking briefly over at his crew before speaking again. "We're not with them," he said, nodding toward the old gang. "You might not know it, but they've been after you for a while. We've been watching over you, making sure they didn't get to you first." Mia's confusion deepened, but at the same time, something inside her flickered, like a dim light in the dark. She didn't know who these people were, but they were the first to offer her any kind of protection. "So," the leader continued, "we're here to give you another choice, Mia. It's yours to make. You don't have to join them, but you can't keep running either." Mia stared at him, her mind racing with too many questions to process. She had made a choice once already, and now it seemed she was going to have to make another. One thing was clear, though. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot.